Every city has an origin story.
Welcome to Quote the Queen City, where we peel back the pages of Cincinnati's history.
Quote the Queen City! Quote the Queen City! We crack the case!
In issue 7, we unmask a figure who became one of the very first international superstars of the silver screen, and she's from right here in Cincinnati. She was the blueprint for the modern movie star, a woman whose entire public identity was a brilliantly manufactured myth. Long before Marilyn Monroe, whom I actually adore and wrote a book about. It's called Saving Marilyn. Google
It's
it.
awesome.
There was a girl from Avondale in Cincinnati, Ohio, who terrified and thrilled the entire world. She was the world's very first cinematic sex symbol.
Today, we unveil the origin story of Theda Bara.
Her tie to the Queen City, before she was the exotic, mystical Vamp of the Hollywood legend, she was a bright, ambitious high schooler right here in Cincinnati who dreamed of stardom in the big city. Sounds like somebody I know.
This is Christy.
And this is her sidekick, Joe.
And this is
Quote the Queen City.
Okay, Joe, let's set the stage because the true origin of Theda Bara isn't an Egyptian tomb. It's a very respectable merchant tailor shop right here in Cincinnati. Our girl was born Theodosia Goodman on July 29th, 1885, even though she kind of flubbed those numbers throughout her life.
Marketing.
But we know that she was born July 29th, 1885.
Okay,
Now, right out of the gate, her name is a whole mood.
that's true.
She was named after Theodosia Burr, the daughter of Vice President Aaron Burr.
Oh, the one from Hamilton. Dear Theodosia, what to say to you?
Exactly that one. Let's not do any more singing.
Aw, man. Okay.
So the original Theodosia Burr famously vanished at sea in 1812.
That's fairly romantic for the period, actually.
Right? It's a very strange person to name your child after. Some people swear that Theda's middle name was Burr, but when you look at her old records from Walnut Hills High School, her middle initial is actually listed as a D. So sadly, her official birth certificate went up in smoke during the infamous Cincinnati courthouse fire, which we're going to cover here on Quote the Queen City soon. So we can't know for sure, but whether it was a B or a D, she was destined for a capital D drama.
Fire, the old enemy of humanity. And her family background is honestly so much cooler than the fake history the studios cooked up later. Her dad, Bernard Goodman, was a Polish-Jewish immigrant who came to America, worked his tuchus off, and became a highly successful tailor. Her mom, Pauline Louis de Capet, I think I got that right, was Swiss-French and incredibly cultured. So you have this mix of intense Midwestern work ethic and European sophistication, raising 3 kids in Avondale, of all places. Theodosia, her little brother Mark, who went by Buddy, and her little sister Esther, who later changed her name to Lori. That's an interesting girl thing. And the Goodmans, in fact, would change their last name to Bara later in life after Theda's success.
Now, if you want to know what was going on inside young Theodosia's head, you had to go on a literal treasure hunt. You can't just look this up on Wikipedia. I had to go deep into the Archives and Rare Books Library repository at the University of Cincinnati to read her unpublished memoir. It's a massive 450-page typewritten manuscript called Woman or Vampire by Theda herself. She's supposed to write it with T. Everett Hooray. He was supposed to be the ghostwriter, but that never kind of came to fruition. And this memoir also has several letters from her to him. The memoir is unfinished, it's unpolished, and it's completely wild and includes letters to Mr. Hooray, as I said.
She writes that as a child, she became the prize recitationist of her class, which is that even a
Right.
word?
Is
Really?
that a
I
word?
mean, that's something that I get the root of it, but no, I have never heard of it, and I read some pretty weird stuff.
Okay, so if Theda used it in her manuscript, we're going to validate it
Sure
here.
enough, it's a
So
beautiful word.
recitationist, it is.
That's right.
And her absolute favorite poem to perform for people was this tragic little piece called The Dirty-Faced Brat.
Oh,
It was about a starving little boy who had the good sense to go out and shovel snow to keep the wolf from the door. And how poetic is that for
Oh, yeah.
Cincinnati?
I mean, classic children's entertainment, it's like you gotta do, or you're gonna die, or you're gonna starve, it's
Right.
it's amazing how hazardous life was for children.
Right. But listen to how she describes it in her notes. She wrote, quote, "What a delight it was to me when I found I could make people cry. I cried with them and gloated over their power." Unquote. The girl was 8 years old and she was already drunk on dramatic dominance.
That's every 8-year-old girl I've ever known. But anyway, so she actually traced her theatrical awakening to a trip to the circus around that same age. She was utterly mesmerized by the bareback horse riders, these women cracking whips, doing somersaults, standing on their hands while horses galloped in circles. So naturally, she and her brother Buddy decided to produce her first show in Old Man Diker's barn. They charged 5 pins for admission and lured in the neighborhood kids with lemonade and cookies. What is a pin?
So let's talk about the pins for a second. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, charging pins for admission was a ubiquitous tradition for children putting on neighborhood backyard theater shows, circus acts, or magic routines. It was essentially the universal currency of make-believe.
So instead of actual money, neighborhood children would pay to see a show using standard metal straight pins or safety pins taken from their mother's sewing baskets. So there was a childhood currency. That's worth examining if there was like a sudden loss of pins in the neighborhood or something. Interesting.
So in this show, Theda wrote and sang and danced and recited. She was a resuscitationist.
Yeah, that's correct.
And
Indeed.
she felt absolute dominion over her tiny barn audience.
My.
She noted, quote, "Even then, I knew that hundreds of thousands of people would someday come to see me," unquote. That is some elite next level manifestation.
But she wasn't a perfect little angel. She also tells this hilarious story about a local candy shop run by an older maiden lady named Mrs. Pugh. Now, I think maiden lady being one who was never married. So, just to get the context down. So, Theda saw one of her wealthy friends walk in and say, "Charge it." So, she figured, hey, that sounds free. So, Theda picks out a mountain of candy and told Mrs. Pugh to put it on her tab. And she kept doing it over and over again.
And over and over. So, cut to a few weeks later, and Mrs. Pugh gives Theda an inventory list written on a massive strip of wallpaper. Theda described it as looking like a 6-reel film. Obviously, that's an exaggeration because that would be about 6,000 feet of film.
Right.
But it was a lot.
Yeah.
And her little lawless sugar binge totaled over $5, which in today's money
Oof.
would be over $200. So,
$100.
nothing to laugh at. But luckily, her parents did. They thought it was funny and they paid it off. But the girl definitely knew how to live beyond her means early on.
$200 is a very significant amount. So those are some very
Especially for
understanding
candy.
parents. Oh my goodness. All right. So at age 12, Theda reads an article stating a woman can only achieve true greatness in 3 ways: as a queen, a courtesan, or an actress. She breaks it down methodically. Queen, out of the question for a girl in Ohio. Courtesan, it sounds incredibly alluring because of the jewels and the millions of dollars, but she isn't quite sure what the job description actually entails.
So she went to Anna, who was the family cook, to get clarification on courtesans. And Anna slams a dish so hard that it breaks in two and gives her a fierce lecture about honest women and how a courtesan is basically a thief. Terrified and morally shocked, Theda immediately crosses courtesan off her list. So the only thing left to do was become an actress.
The memoir definitely shows she was trying to feed that mystical vamp image later in life. Lots of stories about consulting Ouija boards and tricking men. There's even a slightly traumatizing story where she tries to use her dramatic charm on her childhood doctor so he won't give her a shot. Sadly for young Theda, her hypnotic gaze failed, and he just flipped her over and gave her the shot right in the buttocks anyway.
Sorry about your luck, but
Yeah.
vaccines save lives.
Indeed.
Okay, so real life comes at you fast, but she kept refining her craft. She went to Walnut Hills High School, which is still an academic powerhouse here
Yeah,
in Cincinnati.
That's crazy.
You have to pass a test to get in, so they don't accept just anybody. She graduated in 1903 and spent 2 years studying theater at the University of Cincinnati. But by 1905, the local stage just wasn't big enough for her. She dropped the last name Goodman, took her mother's maiden name that sounded more exotic, so she became Theodosia Ducoupé, and bought a one-way ticket to New York City.
Now, everyone pictures moving to New York as this instant montage of glamorous stage doors. But the reality for Theda was a brutal, decade-long slog. She spent nearly 10 years grinding in regional theater, playing minor roles, and barely scraping by.
And we have to pause here for a massive reality check. By the time she finally got her break, she was 30 years old. In 1914, Hollywood was completely obsessed with childlike innocence. Mary Pickford, with her golden curls, was in her 20s and she was playing literal teenagers with these sausage curls in her hair. She was America's sweetheart.
Sausage curls.
The idea of a 30-year-old unknown actress becoming a global megastar seemed nearly impossible.
Enter director Frank Powell. Powell needed a large crowd of background extras for a few specific community/courtroom scenes in a silent film called The Stain. Theda managed to get hired as one of these nameless, uncredited extras just to make a quick buck. I've done extra work before. It's grueling for not much money.
And this was very quick. She's not on screen for very long. This is one of her surviving movies that you can check out on YouTube. So after The Stain, Powell needed to cast a film for William Fox, whose name may sound familiar. He's the guy who would go on to found the Fox Film Corporation.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, a little company called Fox Corporation. The movie was called A Fool There Was, based on a Rudyard Kipling poem. Powell saw this striking pale woman working as a background extra, looked into her incredibly intense kohl-rimmed eyes. That's what they called the black stuff that they rubbed on their eyes. It's kohl, Kohl, and basically went, that's her. That's our vamp.
But she wasn't the sweet girl tied to the train tracks. She was cast as the vampire, a hypersexual, predatory woman who quite literally drained men of their money, their sanity, and their lives.
A Fool There Was actually based on a massive, multi-layered pop culture phenomenon of the turn of the century. It represents a fascinating chain of creative inspiration. A painting inspired a poem, which inspired a play, which finally became the iconic movie.
First came the painting. Philip Burne-Jones, the son of the famous pre-Raphaelite painter Edward Burne-Jones, exhibited a painting in London depicting a pale, dark-haired, dominant woman looking down triumphantly over a totally depleted, defeated man lying helpless on a bed. We'll post the photo in the Pinterest board. This painting, called The Vampire, shocked Victorian society because it completely flipped the traditional gender dynamics on their head. The woman was the predator, and the male was the victim.
Then came the poem. To celebrate his friend Philip Burne-Jones's exhibit, the legendary author Rudyard Kipling wrote a companion poem also titled The Vampire. The poem was printed directly in the exhibition catalog so visitors could read it while staring at the painting. The poem's famous opening lines are exactly where the movie got its title. A fool there was, and he made his prayer, even as you and I, to a rag and a bone and a hair.
Kipling used the metaphor of a vampire not as a supernatural creature that drinks physical blood, but as a destructive, manipulative woman who drains a foolish man of his honor, his money, his soul, and his life.
Exactly. And the poem was such a massive global hit that American playwright Porter Emerson Brown adapted the concept into a highly sensationalized Broadway stage play called A Fool There Was in 1909.
The play officially brought the story into the modern world, turning Kipling's poetic metaphors into a dramatic plot about a wealthy, successful family man who gets utterly ruined by an unprincipled, seductive woman known simply as the vampire.
The movie was a seismic shock to 1915 America. Audiences had never seen a woman hold that kind of unapologetic, destructive power on the silver screen. It was an overnight sensation, and it permanently added the word vamp to the English dictionary as slang for the femme fatale. You know her. You know her. She's the Carringtons of California. She's the women of Dynasty. This film is one of only 6 of Theodosia's films that survived a fire at Fox Studios in 1937, so you can watch it in its entirety on YouTube.
Fox Studios realized they were sitting on a gold mine, but they had a major branding problem. A nice Jewish girl from the Midwest named Theodosia Goodman did not scream exotic, malevolent man-eater.
Mhm.
So the Fox publicity department launched what is arguably the most audacious, hilarious, and successful fake news campaign in Hollywood history. They completely deleted Cincinnati from her bio.
Ironic that it comes from Fox.
Oh, stop.
Commentary over. Okay, so they legally changed her name to Theda Bara, and the studio leaked a rumor to the press that her name was a secret anagram for Arab death.
My goodness.
So bizarre. Now, looking through the archives, they actually picked the name before they realized the anagram worked. So it was a total happy accident for them. But they ran with it like a track star.
Oh, that's what you do in marketing, man. Serendipity. They told reporters she was the mysterious love child of a French actress and an Italian artist, born in the literal shadow of the Sphinx in the Sahara Desert. They claimed she possessed ancient Egyptian dark magic and could predict the future.
And most of the press ate it up. I think there were probably some smart people out there who didn't actually buy it, but most of them did. So
the age of the polls.
So
too.
to keep the illusion alive, the studio held these completely unhinged press conferences in like New York luxury hotels. So they would rent a suite, pull thick velvet curtains shut to block all daylight, crank up the radiators to 90 degrees so it felt like the Sahara, and burn so much exotic incense that reporters were practically choking on it.
Well, you got to set the stage, so. And they wouldn't let her even speak English. She had to sit there languidly on the couch, whispering in broken French, while a studio publicist translated her dark, mystical thoughts for the American journalists. They took publicity photos of her posing with real human skulls, crystal balls, and live snakes. I mean, reporters must have loved it.
And if you Google this, you can still see some of these publicity photos that she took. They're all very kind of mystical and out there.
Oh, yeah.
In her manuscript that you see, she admitted that she completely lost herself in this myth. She tells this great story about being on a promotional tour in Chicago, which we were just in.
Yeah,
She was
great town.
reclining. Yeah, it's a great town. She was reclining on a Madame de Maintenon couch, wearing a heavy green velvet gown embroidered with scarlet roses, surrounded by suffocating incense. She said stepping out of character for even a second would have ruined the whole aesthetic.
But there was a hilarious crack in the armor. A publicist actually arranged a little inside joke with a young reporter named Luella Parsons, long before Luella became the most feared gossip columnist in Hollywood. The publicist let Luella stay behind in the hotel room after all the gullible cub reporters had left.
The second the door clicked shut, Theda, our exotic Egyptian vampire, leapt off of the couch, threw open the windows, opening to the freezing Chicago air, and shouted in perfect, crisp Midwestern accent, "Give me air!"
You can take the girl out of Ohio, but you can't take the Ohio out of the girl.
Right, and that Ohio girl had quite the work ethic. Between 1915 and 1919, she made nearly 40 films for Fox, playing historical seductresses like Cleopatra and Salome. She was pulling $4,000 a week, which is roughly $100,000 a week in today's money. Not too shabby.
It's insane.
But it came with literal physical torture.
Indeed, she earned her money. For Cleopatra, she had to wear what she called her agony dress and an agony crown, a tight metal asp that had to be forced onto her skull.
Ouch.
When they pulled it off after a 3-hour shoot, blood was literally trickling down her forehead from the deep cuts.
And don't forget the peacock dress. This is a literal peacock dress. It had a 25-foot train made from the actual tails of 280 peacocks. Sorry about your luck, guys. No modern union would ever let a studio get away with it today, probably.
Yeah. Most of Theda's early films were shot along the East Coast, where the film industry was then based, primarily at Fox Studios in Fort Lee, New Jersey. Her entire family came to live with her in New York City in the early years, and in 1917 she finally made the move to Hollywood when she filmed Cleopatra, one of her most successful films.
Many films followed, with over 40 to her credit, as I said before, including a few writing credits for her and her sister Lori. She played powerhouses like Carmen, Cleopatra, and Salome. Occasionally, they would let her take on the role of the girl next door, but it was her vamp roles that she was most known for. The tragedy of playing a monster on screen is that the public eventually forgets you're acting. Conservative women's groups, how surprising, started protesting her movies, claiming she was single handedly destroying the moral fiber of American men. People were genuinely terrified to look her in the eye in public, they said. But she famously told a reporter, quote, "I have the face of a vampire, but the heart of a feminist," unquote.
Her unpublished memoir proves just how fiercely intelligent she was. She was totally trapped by the studio's hypersexualized myth, but in her own words, she wrote that she was neither good nor a bad woman, but a human woman who sought, strove, and loved. She absolutely despised the fact that society forced women into these neat little binary boxes.
She actually viewed her vamp characters as symbols of female autonomy. Think about it. She was playing these powerful, dominant women who controlled men and ran their own lives before American women even had the right to vote. She defined the vampire instinct not as supernatural evil, but as an innate, deeply human psychological strength, the power to sway and mold your own destiny.
And her real daily life was the ultimate contrast. While the world thought she was drinking the blood of her lovers, the second she got home, the mask dropped. She would put on a plain gingham apron, walk into the kitchen, and cook dinner with her mom, who was her constant companion and kept her grounded. She was a woman who sat at home reading Plato and Nietzsche, while the rest of the world thought she was a wild creature of the desert. She was entirely in on the joke.
And Theda was a patriot. In February 1918, she was unanimously named the official godmother of the 158th Infantry Regiment.
She embraced the role, visiting the troops at Camp Kearney, California, to boost morale before their deployment to France, where soldiers famously sang "Vamp, Vamp, Vamp" in her honor.
By the time World War I ended, public tastes completely flipped. Audiences were tired of the dark, gothic drama. They wanted the wholesome girl next door vibe. Exhausted by the suffocating makeup and tired of being typecast, Theda walked away from Fox Studios in 1919.
But her personal life was about to get a major upgrade. In 1921, she married Charles Brabham, a highly respected British-born film director. And honestly, guys, their marriage is one of the sweetest, most refreshing anomalies in early Hollywood history. In an industry famous for explosive divorces and messy scandals, Theda and Charles were completely, fiercely devoted to each other for 34 years until the day she died.
Aww.
Goals.
Right. So, a lot of film historians ask why they never had kids. There wasn't some dark, tragic Hollywood cover up there. When they got married in 1921, Theda was 36 years old, which back then was considered a very late start for a family. So, they simply didn't have biological children. But she was incredibly family oriented. And in fact, her brother and sister didn't have any children either.
After retiring from the grueling pace of the studios, Charles and Theda bought this gorgeous, sprawling estate in Beverly Hills. The woman who used to pose with human skulls for a paycheck became the most celebrated hostess in Hollywood. She threw these elegant, legendary dinner parties, renowned for her sharp wit, her incredible cooking, and her brilliant intellect. She completely shed the vampire skin and finally just got to be Theodosia again.
And later on, they actually bought a huge plot of land in Nova Scotia in Canada. And that is eventually, they did pass away in California, but they spent most of their time in Nova Scotia at the end.
Fascinating.
So before we get to the Hall of Justice, we have to start with heartbreak.
Mm.
Joe, if our listeners want to go watch a Theda Bara marathon tonight, what's the problem?
It is one of the single greatest tragedies to film preservation history. In 1937, a massive, spontaneous nitrate vault fire at the Fox storage facility in New Jersey destroyed almost all of her original film negatives. Out of roughly 40 movies she made at the absolute peak of her powers, only 6 survive in their entirety today. Most of her groundbreaking work is just completely lost to time.
So Theda sadly passed away from stomach cancer in 1955 at the age of 69, with Charles following her just 2 years later. But the world didn't forget her impact.
It's time to enter the Hall of Justice to cement her final legacy. In 1960, she received a posthumous star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
In 1994, the U.S. Postal Service honored her with a gorgeous commemorative stamp designed by the legendary caricaturist Al Hirschfeld. I have a letter with that stamp framed in our hallway.
She also had a massive heart for service. During World War I, she used her immense fame to sell millions of dollars in Liberty bonds. She toured military camps, marched right alongside the troops, and as we mentioned, became the official mascot for the 158th Infantry. They ironically nicknamed her Sunshine, which she thought was the funniest possible name for a professional vampire. She even auctioned off a single kiss in San Francisco for a $50 war bond. That was a big buy.
It was a lot of money then, yeah. Her cultural imprint was just massive. She changed the literal English language with the word vamp. She had ragtime songs written about her, a signature perfume that supposedly smelled like the wisdom of the serpent. However that would smell, that doesn't sound very good to me. And there
Smells
was,
like wisdom.
right? Yeah, a serpent.
Well, no sillier than the commercials they have today.
And there was even an official Theda Bara sandwich sold in delis, which was minced ham, mayonnaise, pimentos, and sweet pickles served hot on toasted bread.
Vampy.
So let's bring it all back home to the Queen City. Her physical legacy isn't just on a star in Los Angeles. It's right here in our own backyard. One of her childhood homes still stands beautifully to this day on Hutchins Avenue in Avondale. And Joe and I actually got an incredible opportunity to tour it recently.
It was honestly surreal walking through those rooms, looking at the architecture and realizing this is where she lived and dreamed before she was the biggest star in the world. The house is stunning, is in beautiful condition.
And I have to share a little full circle moment. I actually brought a piece of custom artwork that I created of Theda and gifted it to the current owner, whom we're not naming to protect her privacy. So I was very honored that she hung that piece in her house where Theda actually lived. So that was so very cool. Thank you so much. You know who you are.
That was quite a moment. It was a great day.
Issue 7 is officially in the books.
The original Vamp, a cinematic pioneer and a true Queen City icon. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll see you in the next issue. Thanks for joining us for
Quote the Queen City.